Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. Today's guest is here to make the case for theism. He actually reached out to me on Facebook and asked me if I would have him on the show so he could make the case. I knew him prior to that from him being on a friend of mine talk show, so I figured I'd have him on and give it a go. Benjamin Seevers is a student fellow with the Institute for Faith and Freedom, and he is also a councilman in his local government. Benjamin Seevers, welcome to the Rational Egoist.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Michael. And just to correct, I recently stepped down from council, so
Oh, okay.
I'm no
Sorry.
longer on there. Yeah, but yeah,
Not
that's
enough of
that's very
government, huh?
yeah that's a recent development. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. But you were the councilman, so I'm not
I
that
was.
far
Yeah,
off.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what makes you want to have this discussion? Why did you reach out and tell me you wanted to make the case for theism? You actually said theism and Christianity. I don't know if we'll be able to pack both in, but maybe we'll see how it goes. But why? What's the reason?
Yeah, I've noticed that. Well, I'm not an objectivist, but I've noticed a lot of objectivists and libertarian-oriented people have a problem with the idea of Christianity and theism in general.
Okay.
And I had this argument with somebody in your Facebook post that you made regarding it, and I just wanted to maybe clear some things up and try to make my case rather than have a lengthy discussion on argument on Facebook that goes nowhere.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
difficult to keep typing over and over again, right? Responses,
yeah,
type. Yeah, I'm not a
yeah,
big fan either. I like to
and,
say a little bit, but it gets
and
out
you
of
know
hand.
it gets like it's not civil. It's just you can't really have a discussion like that on Facebook.
Yeah, it is difficult. I'll grant you that. Okay, so
Yeah.
before we can debate whether a God exists, what do you mean by God? How do you define God? What are the concepts, reference, and reality?
Yeah. So what I define as God, I guess just the theistic position, is a rational creator. So the first mover of the universe, so to speak, a rational creator of the entire universe. That is what I'm talking about when it comes to theism. Now,
Okay.
Christians, like myself, we think other characteristics are also apply. So there's necessary characteristics of the Christian God, such as omnibenevolence. So
Okay.
God is all good. God is just.
Okay.
Um, omnipresence, omnipotence, those are also lumped in as well with the Christian God. I'd say those are the necessary characteristics of the God I'm
Okay,
trying
so
to
is God a
argue for.
physical entity? What are his manifest attributes?
God is I guess you could say an immaterial. That is what I would say. I'm not. I think distinctions like that are more important for empirical arguments for God's existence. So a lot of people try to reason from like effects, like you see stuff in the universe, and
Sure.
you try to reason from those things in the universe to higher or transcendent things such as God as the creator of that thing. But
Okay.
that's not what I do. That's not really what I think
Okay.
is appropriate for apologism, especially Christian apologism.
Okay.
Because for Christians, we're trying to say, well, look, the law, the truth is written on your heart. It's not written outside. Well, you can see God's creation outside of you, but if we're making the truth reliant on observations, then you're opening yourself up to problems such as, well, what if I don't observe that? What if I misperceive that? What if you're just giving people probabilistic arguments rather
Okay.
than undeniable rational arguments?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, hold on. So you said God is a rational being, but you also
Mhm.
said he's immaterial.
Yeah.
Rationality is a function of thought. Thoughts are a function of a physical organism, specifically the part of a physical organism that is a brain. That's the organ of thought. And so that's the organ of rationality. How can a being without a physical brain reason?
I'm not exactly committed to the idea that rationality is the function of the brain per se.
Okay.
I have them there. There's the mind body problem, and that has existed for a long time. It's not inconsistent or illogical to say that the mind is separate from the body.
Okay, well,
There's
give me
definitely
an
a lot of
example.
problems.
Can you provide me with an example of a reasoning being, a rational being that didn't have a brain, or give me an example of a significantly damaged brain? I'm thinking, for instance, of Phineas Gage, or somebody that ends
Mhm.
up with being brain dead that is still capable of
Yeah,
rational thought.
yeah. Well, it just because you like say if I removed your head,
Yeah.
I mean that's not going to destroy your mind.
If you
I mean,
removed
like,
my head,
yeah,
if
yeah,
you
because
moved my head, I'd be
my
done. I'd be dead.
yeah, your body's dead, but
Okay, but I would have no brain activity. There would be no evidence at all of any rational thought coming from me if you severed my head from my
sure,
body.
but just because there's no evidence of something doesn't mean that thing doesn't exist.
Well, but okay, well, herein it lies the problem. How do you expect to convince somebody, me, anybody? Because if I want to convince you of something, I say, okay, this is the evidence, this is what happened, and I make my case. But you're saying, well, I'm going to convince you of something absent evidence. Well,
No,
why?
I'm not making evidence. I'm not making empirical observation the the criterion for truth. I'm making undeniability, so logical undeniability. I think we're coming at it from probably different philosophical backgrounds.
Well,
I
okay, so that'd be the first thing. So let me ask the question this way first. Okay, so if you're going to make your case, you're making your case for the existence of God. We haven't gotten to the Christian God yet, but just of a theistic God, right? God. So how do you start? What's your argument?
well, here's kind of the foundation, like the epistemological method I'm using.
Okay.
Uh, so a truth, kind of truth I'm trying to find is one that is undeniable.
Okay.
So an undeniable truth means to have an undeniable truth means that if you were to deny it, you are
Hmm.
assuming that thing in your denial.
So
That
you're
that is
talking
that
about
is
an axiom. You're talking about an
yes,
axiomatic
an
concept.
axiomatic truth. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we have axioms such as human action. Every time you deny human action, you are affirming human action by
Sure.
arguing. You're committing human action. I think we might agree on that.
Sure.
You cannot argue that you cannot argue. Okay, like that's just every time you argue that you can't argue, you're
Yes.
affirming argument that you can't argue. So those are some basic axioms that we come to. And Descartes has the I think therefore I exist. I mean
Sure.
that's also a axiom. But I think there's a problem here, and it's that and to, I guess illustrate this problem, I will go back to Descartes. So he posits this thing called the evil demon hypothesis. It's a way to radically cast doubt over everything. What if an evil demon designed me to in that I can never arrive at truth? And he's saying, well, even if an evil demon designed me, I know that I exist because if him deceiving me implies that I exist. Okay,
Okay.
so there's that fundamental problem that he thinks at least that he gets over. I point out I think that he fails in this,
Okay.
and I think some other philosophers such as Thomas Reid actually agree with me here that the Cartesian project failed in that by using your logic, to arrive at this axiom, you may be using the logic that this evil demon implanted in you. And it seems contradictory to say that, well, I don't exist, but he's also deceiving me. But that could very well be a truth that that is true outside of what you perceive to be true. You get what I'm saying here? So
I
like
do. I know.
there could be a higher, yeah,
I know
yeah,
the Cartesian argument.
yeah, yeah. But that's
The
the
problem
foundation.
is
Yeah,
it's similar to the brain in the vat problem, right? How do you know that you're not just a brain in a vat somewhere, and that all of this is just an illusion, right? Or you
well,
might go to the Matrix, right? You're really living in a fantasy world.
yeah,
You're hooked
well,
up to a machine. These arguments are all very old. The
yes,
problem with them is I can if that's going to be the criteria, then that I'm going to assert something as a hypothetical possibility, and if you can't refute it, that then you've made your case, then you
No,
have undercutted argumentation. I'm talking about Descartes now, because there's no evidence. We have no reason to believe that an evil demon is controlling us. I
well,
have
no,
no
it's
reason to
certainly.
believe. There's no reason to believe I'm a brain in a vat somewhere, or that I'm living in an artificial matrix. There's none. So if somebody's going to make that case, it's not enough to just say, how do you know that it's not the truth? You have to
Well,
make a positive case for it.
well, Michael, I'm just setting out the stage here.
Okay.
I'm setting out what actually casts doubt uh over our uh derivations through logic. So there's premises that you can start from. There's implicit premises that you can start from in logic that are consistent with knowledge, and those that aren't consistent with knowledge. So the materialist, the person that does not believe in God, the non-theist, he starts off from the presumption of assemblage, random assemblage, which is what Hume posited. Hume posited random assemblage might be the thing that determines the composition of reality. He lays that out in his dialogues. So there's one option. He, Descartes, as I mentioned, gives the evil demon hypothesis as a potential premise, which would undercut all of rationality. So you have these two options here, and there's others that have been posited, like your brain in the vat that you mentioned, or the animalistic uh, option that Hume also presents. But both of those also affirm rationality as well. But there's probably a higher cause. They imply a higher cause. I'm talking about first causes here: random assemblage, evil demon, or some other thing.
Okay.
So first two, random assemblage of atoms, that is inconsistent with knowledge. That is the materialist presumption. That's where materialists start. That is what I that is what I'm identifying as a problem with knowledge.
Okay.
If that determined the composition or the creation of your mind or brain,
Yeah.
then you cannot have knowledge.
Why?
You cannot have certain knowledge
Why?
because your mind is being composed by something that is purely random, purely arbitrary.
Well, okay, hold on a second. First of all, it wouldn't be random, because it would be a result of cause and effect, of causal relationships that proceed backwards in time until the present day. So it wouldn't be random.
Well, where does
Secondly, it
cause and
wouldn't be
effect come from?
arbitrary. Hold on, because arbitrary means that somebody is deciding it, that somebody is making an arbitrary decision. But that's not what the argument is. The argument, I presume you're referring to, ultimately would be evolution, by means of, genetic mutations, natural selection, and whatnot. But explaining how a thing came about, in that case the human brain or the human mind, you're not then discounting its accuracy, because the very means you would have to know about evolution and natural selection would be the human mind. The very reason you know about falsifiability, not falsifiability, randomness, arbitrariness, is because of the human mind. You, in that very statement, are claiming the type of knowledge that you are then going to claim is impossible in those set of circumstances. So I don't see how that the sort of hypothesis or the base from which you're starting negates it. Ayn Rand, for instance, she had three axiomatic concepts: existence, identity, and consciousness. She said any attempt to deny them would have to use them, because any statement I utter implies that I exist, I am something, and I am conscious. There's no way to escape it, and I can't see how to escape it. And it's axiomatic. It's not a priori knowledge in the Kantian sense or in the Misesian sense. But it's an axiomatic concept, and it's observable from direct experience of myself in reality. And so why is that knowledge negated because it didn't come about from a creator? And even if it would be, by the way, even if it would be, that doesn't prove a creator. All it proves is that knowledge, even if you could prove it, it would just prove that knowledge is impossible. So maybe it is. But that doesn't go to the point where you then postulate a creator.
Well, I would postulate a creator, a rational creator, a benevolent one, as a way to give a premise that is actually consistent with knowledge, rather than the materialist presumption, which is seemingly not. Now, back to to your point about Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm at least I haven't read deeply her philosophy, but I agree that those are axioms. You know, I exist, I'm conscious. I mean, those are performatively true. I mean, it's not that you even experience them. you are affirming them every time you try to argue against them.
Yes, that
So
absolutely.
I would agree, but insofar as you know, and insofar as I'm in my own mind. So when it comes to logic, I think you can either make appeals like horizontally or vertically. So there's a philosopher named Habermas, Jürgen Habermas. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
His
Critical theory.
Yeah,
It's from
he
the
tries to
Frankfurt School, correct?
yeah, yes, he tries to appeal horizontally. In order to like affirm something, it must be, or in order for truth to exist, it must be common among others. So truth is arrived through discourse. That's roughly what he's saying. So he is affirming his epistemic foundations, his mind, through horizontal appeals. Whereas what I'm doing here is I'm
What he's
trying to
doing
start
is
from the
affirming it through
causes.
collectivist appeals.
Um,
He's saying that
I think
knowledge
that
is
has
dependent on what other people accept or don't accept, and that's wrong.
well, I think that gives. I think that's trying to read too much into it. But I'm not trying to defend him. I'm just trying to tell you what he's doing, what some others do.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is here. I'm looking at what the cause of your starting point is.
Okay.
Okay. So your starting point is my individual human reason, and I'm arriving on all these axioms. But
Sure.
who's to say that any of the innate knowledge that I'm arriving at is actually an accurate representation of what's real, of reality,
Okay.
of being?
All right.
So
Okay.
I'm trying to say, well, there's premises, there's first causes that you can start from that are either consistent or inconsistent with those things being accurate representations of being reality. So you could start from a variety of things. So as I said, Hume posited random assemblage as an option, as an alternative to a rational creator. So that's like his only other uh, alternative that is like a full stop. This is where the buck ends type of
Sure.
starting point. So you have either a rational theism. So that's just like deism. I'm not even defending Christianity at this point, or random assemblage. And Hume acknowledges that, like, well, look, what you see as cause and effect is really just an observation. It's not. It's something that you acquire through repeated observations of the natural world. So there's not necessarily any physical laws.
Well, the
It's just
problem
an
is
observation.
Hume denied cause and effect. He said all
Was
you're
that?
seeing, Hume denied cause and
Yeah,
effect. He
yeah,
said all you're seeing is one thing following another. I
yes.
get that. By introducing Descartes and then Hume, you've started with a rationalist, ended with an empiricist. The problem I'm having here is I don't know what the argument essentially seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong in what you're saying. You're saying that unless there's a God, then all that's random in our heads, so that all we have is random, and therefore we can't count on any knowledge. But because we have axioms that we know to be true, there has to be a God, right?
That's roughly what I'm saying.
Okay?
Um,
Here's the
yeah.
problem with it. Two things. One, that doesn't prove God because the axioms in that sense, if we're going to throw hypotheticals out there, could be wrong. If somebody's deceiving us, if Descartes' evil demon is deceiving us, or Hume's random assemblage is deceiving us, then what we take to be an axiom would be wrong. I don't accept that. I think knowledge is both possible and necessary for human existence. But to get from there to say that unless there was a God that made us that way, we couldn't be that way, well, then I could just as easily say to you, well, who made God that we can trust God's view of things? He would then need a creator, and you would have an infinite regress of creators going back into, like I said, into infinity. It doesn't solve the problem to just insert a God there. So do you have a positive case based on evidence for the existence of God? Or are you saying that it's just, you said earlier, for instance, it's written in our hearts. You said if it's dependent on empirical observation, some people will see it, some won't. But not everybody experiences is written in their hearts either. So you don't escape that problem by saying it's written on our hearts. You just run into a different angle on it. You say some people are going to say it's written on my heart. Other people are going to say it's no. I saw two Christians arguing one time, and one says to him, I know I'm right because the Holy Ghost told me. And the other one said, no, I know I'm right because the Holy Ghost told me.
Yeah,
If you're
that is
not going
not
to, no, but
that
if
is
you
not
don't
rational
appeal,
discussion.
appeal to evidence, then there's no way to solve that.
I mean, what type of evidence do you want me to provide?
I want
Like,
you. I
you
want.
want me to point? You want me to point at a
No, I want you.
microscope
No,
or something?
I'm. What I'm saying is make the case for. Make the case for the theistic God that there had to be a first cause or a first creator. Aristotle said that there had to be a first mover, an
Yeah,
unmoved mover. He said based on the the principle of motion, that everything's in motion and that things don't move unless they're moved. Therefore, there has to be a first mover. He went back to that and said there's the uncaused cause, the unmoved mover.
yeah,
The
yeah.
problem is that by the time you get to Newtonian physics, we know that a body that is at rest will stay at rest until it's moved. But if a body is already in motion, it
Yeah,
will stay in motion until it's stopped. So that does away with Aristotle's point.
yeah.
That one point.
I'm not Aristotelian
No,
on
but
that.
how do you? Why is a first cause necessary? Let me put it this way. Why is a first cause necessary? Even if a first cause was necessary, why would we assume that that first cause is still living? Even if there were a living being that created the universe, why would we assume that it was still living, given that what we know of life is everything that living dies? So those two problems in and of themselves, you have to get around them. You have to show why.
Yeah. So for the first claim is kind of positing polytheism as an alternative to monotheism. So okay, why is there just one God? Who's God? Who created God? And so on. Well, if polytheism is true, which is kind of the premise a lot of pre-Socratic mystics held, like multiple gods, they're all in battle, they're all fighting,
Sure.
and that was not conducive to philosophical development. And a lot of the pre-Socratic philosophers, the people that succeeded the mystics, they either posited materialism, posited materialist God. So you had some early, I think Heraclitus posited some type of God, whether it be like a material. I'm not sure exactly what they thought, but or they posited some type of deistic God or so on. So those were consistent with early philosophical development. If you were to posit polytheism, like a constant battle between the divines, you're denying you're denying the ability to have absolute knowledge. So say God, this one God controls the oceans, and this other God controls the skies, and this God controls this God controls that.
Yeah.
There's no way to have universal laws, which is what we're trying to obtain through axioms.
Well, hold on. Hold on a second. If you have one God that's capable of miracles, there's no way to have universal laws because he can circumvent them anytime he chooses.
No.
Yes, Jesus reportedly turned water into wine. He raised the dead. He rose from the dead himself. And Elijah ascended into the heavens on a chariot. All those things contradict. Contradict natural law.
If you start from the materialistic presumption, yes, it does contradict that.
Wait, but you just hold on. You just made the statement. If there's a polytheism going on, then there's no way to have knowledge because one God can dictate things here, another God can dictate things here. There can never be a universal knowledge. Universal knowledge implies order, cause and effect. But the God that you believe in can interfere in that. So that would lead to the same trouble that you just brought up.
He doesn't interfere in the natural law. There's nothing undeniable. I mean, I guess there's nothing performatively contradictory about water being turned into wine.
It contradicts the very nature of what water is and what wine is.
Well, all right. Well, say I make
otherwise, what do I have knowledge of? If I don't have knowledge of entities, of what water is, that it consists of oxygen and hydrogen, of wine, which is made from grapes, I have knowledge of nothing.
Let's go back.
Okay.
I make the statement, water turned into wine.
Yes.
Explain to me how that is performatively. Explain to me how I'm performatively contradicting myself.
Because what water is hydrogen and oxygen. It doesn't turn into wine. It's the entity, the identity of water is such that it doesn't do that. The identity of water is such that it freezes at a certain temperature, it boils at another. That's what it does. Its identity. The identity of wine is such that it is made from grapes, not from just water.
Okay, yeah. And you are making empirical, particularist arguments.
Listen, hold on. But there's no way to have knowledge of anything other than through experience. You just said we couldn't have universal knowledge. What knowledge do you have?
I don't agree with that.
Okay, so tell me, what knowledge do we have independent of experience?
That I act, that I argue, that I exist.
And how did you come to know any of that?
through premises, through giving a premises.
Okay, where did you come up with those premises? Assuming you didn't come out of the womb with them, because as a baby you weren't thinking in those terms. You had to first learn language in order to even conceptualize what those things were, and you had to
So
actually experience yourself acting to know what acting was.
I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, there could be innate knowledge. I don't think that's
Well,
necessarily.
okay, to say there could be something is different than saying there is something, but you haven't demonstrated that there is.
I mean, you haven't demonstrated that it isn't.
Because I'm not the one making the claim. You're
Oh,
making the claim that there is. What I'm saying
if,
is all experience that I've ever had, that I've ever encountered, tells me that what I know comes from learning it. It tells me that I have a brain. It tells me that my mind is dependent on my brain, and that is where my rationality comes from.
I get what you're saying, and yes, it's certainly possible.
It sounds like you're going with Mises. Mises argued, following Kant, that we had a priori knowledge. He argued that Mises did, that action was a priori. He went along with the Kant's a priori categories. I disagree with him. I think that he mistook.
I think there's probably a way to make this case. I think there's probably a way to make this case without being as strong as either of them. Say, like, I am in a vat for most of my life that's completely pitch black, and for somehow I survive. Maybe I'm hooked up to an IV or something, and I wake up 30 years from now, and I'm like I'm out in the world. I'm probably not going to be making premises. I'm probably not going to be making. Probably not going to be giving arguments and so on. I mean, I agree with that. I need to experience in order to acquire language and the ability to talk. I need to experience, like, I don't know, maybe other people to understand, like, that I am a thing that exists apart from everything else. I mean, I understand that, but when you're making a claim that, like, okay, look, wine, there's wine right there.
Sure.
And I make the argument, okay, here, wine is this and water is this. I'm experiencing various things. But when I argue, when I make this, when I say wine is, when I say wine is turned or water is turned into wine,
sure,
I am not violating anything intrinsic to argumentation by making that statement.
What you're saying is that you're not contradicting an analytic truth. You're saying that there's nothing in the definition of water that precludes it turning into wine. What I'm saying is that a concept is not its definition.
No, you're saying it's a logical contradiction.
You did. No, I'm not.
No,
it is a logical contradiction.
I agree.
You're saying it's not. You're saying it's not a logical contradiction. I'm saying it is.
But yeah, no, I'm saying it is a logical contradiction.
You're saying it's not.
No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying it is a performative contradiction. I'm not saying it's not a performative contradiction. Therefore, it's not a universal statement.
Okay.
You're saying it is a logical contradiction.
It is, because this is it. Let me ask you a question. Are you saying, if I'm wrong, tell me, that by the definition of what water is, there's nothing in that definition that contradicts the idea that water could turn into wine? You're saying
it's a logical. It's a logical contradiction.
Yes,
the way you're giving the premises is a logical contradiction, but I don't care about that. I'm saying I'm saying it's not a pragmatic contradiction, a performative contradiction, and that's what I'm using as the criterion for certain.
Tell me what you mean by performative.
Performative means is that whenever I'm acting and through argumentation, through the giving of premises and art, and exchanging them with other people through discourse, there's certain things intrinsic to that action that if I make a statement that's contrary to those things, I'm engaged in performative contradiction. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Human action, if you deny that, you're engaged in performative contradiction, not a logical contradiction.
Okay. So let me put it this way. Do you think it's a contradiction for me to say that Benjamin Seevers can flap his arms and fly to me?
There's nothing in that premise that's contradictory.
Because you're looking at logic, and in the way you're looking at logic is you're saying that there's nothing in the definition of Benjamin Seevers.
Well, you haven't defined it, so
no. But you know what Benjamin Seevers is, right?
I mean,
what I'm saying is this: to say Benjamin Seevers can flap his arms to fly to me contradicts the very nature of the identity of Benjamin Seevers. To make the claim that water can turn into wine contradicts the identity of what water is. Okay. That's what I'm saying to you.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not even arguing about that.
Okay, but Then
I mean,
what does it then if I tell you it's impossible to turn water into wine, that for God to do so, that's how it all started, is to
yeah,
interfere with the natural
as you have
laws of the universe. And you said that's not a contradiction. How is it not a contradiction?
as as you have defined it, yes, it is a logical
No, it's not as
contradiction.
I'm defining it, is that what
If he
water
if he
is.
if
It's
he can
what
create
water
water,
is.
if he can create water and wine out of nothing, then he can
That
turn water into
exactly,
wine.
exactly. But that was the point. You said if you had multiple gods all over the place, we couldn't have knowledge because you'd have one god could do this, the other god could do
Yeah.
that. And what I'm saying in my
No,
retort
no, that's
was,
not my argument. That's
hold
not my
on,
argument. No,
you
no,
said we
let me go
couldn't have
back.
universal knowledge.
No, it's that there is one God controlling one aspect of the universe and another God controlling another
Yes,
aspect of the
yes. Then
universe.
we
You
couldn't
cannot
have
have no,
absolute
no. That's
knowledge.
different from the claim that gods are just constantly doing things and intervening. That's different
No,
from those claims. Because my claim is that polytheism is wrong because you cannot have uh, the universe compartmentalized into different
no, you
sections
need to
and
have
also have
universal
universal
laws, right?
knowledge. Yeah,
Yes, you need to
yeah.
have
But
universal
you're right. Those
laws,
are two
right?
different claims.
Yes. And how can you have universal laws or gain knowledge of universal laws when there's an entity who can change them anytime he wants?
Well, he's not changing
He
universal
changed
laws.
water into wine. That contradicts our
That's not a
knowledge of what
universal
wine is.
law. It's not a universal
Hold on a
law.
second. Hold on. Then what would be? What tell me what universal laws are. If it's not a law that one entity can't change into another entity, that water can't turn that it can't change its identity, that water can't turn into wine, that a horse
A,
can't turn into a dinosaur. If that's not a law of the universe, then I don't know what is.
a universal law of the universe
Yeah.
is one that is intrinsic to the process of argumentation. That is what I
Okay.
will die
That's what
on.
Hoppe says.
Well, Hoppe,
That's what
Habermas,
Hoppe says.
Capel, that's what
You
they all say.
haven't proved that. All that is saying that I'm going to refer to language, and language is going to be the means of argumentation. But language refers to things in reality. When I use the word water, it refers to a substance that actually exists. When I say Benjamin Seevers, I'm referring to a thing that actually exists. So when I use the term water, I'm referring to hydrogen and oxygen. That substance cannot turn into wine. And if you have an entity that can change that substance into wine, then I can no longer have universal knowledge of that substance because it can do at any time whatever that entity says it can do.
Again, it's not a performative contradiction to say that.
Okay. So
And that's what I'm using as criterion for
I got it.
but
that's the very thing that I'm rejecting. I'm rejecting
okay,
the
fine.
idea. What I'm rejecting is the idea that constitutes knowledge in any sense, shape, or form. Knowledge is a relationship between the human mind and reality. It's not just self-contained within language. It has to do with whether or not my concepts and the reference of my concepts are accurate. And if my concept of water is accurate, I can have knowledge of that water, and my knowledge of that water says it can't be turned into wine. But here's the thing I don't get. Even if that's all true, even if I cannot have knowledge, if there's no God, maybe I wouldn't have knowledge. You still couldn't prove God by that means.
I still can prove God by what means?
By saying that the only reason we can have knowledge is if there's a God. We have knowledge, therefore there's a God. That doesn't prove it because we might not have knowledge under the circumstances that you're postulating. So you still couldn't arrive at the conclusion that there's a God.
Sure, but if you want to derive like laws, and it seems like there's laws that exist, knowledge that exists.
It seems. What if there isn't? What if I'm mistaken? And what is what I and what is what I want? What does that have to do with anything? Whether I want it to be true or not is irrelevant to if it is true, right?
Well, it's inescapable. So, I mean, that's a start.
And well, God's not inescapable.
Well, a lot of I'm talking about axioms are inescapable.
They are inescapable, but under your criteria, they don't matter.
If they are to mean anything, there must be a premise that is consistent with their inescapableness.
Okay, I want to get a little bit because you also said Christianity, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why, even if you could prove that God exists through the argument you said, why the Christian God? We have the Jewish God, the Muslim God, the Hindu gods. We've got gods that no longer exist, that no one believes in any longer.
Yeah.
So why would we believe the Christian God?
Well, there's necessary characteristics of the Christian God, which may overlap with other religions. I'm not denying that. And there's accidental characteristics. So I cannot derive logically that Christ gave, the Christian God gave Moses the Ten Commandments. Like that is just an empirical statement. I can't logically derive that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not making that my argument.
Okay.
I've been kind of dealing with it up to this point, um, uh, throughout the argument. There's just two characteristics which I haven't really addressed: the moral perfection and the benevolence of God.
Okay.
So, assuming that everything we've said up to this point is the correct way of proving God, then there's the choice between having a benevolent God, having a indifferent God, an imperfect God, or a malevolent God. Now, upon the criterion from which I was using earlier, it would seem to me that malevolence, imperfection, or indifference would be inconsistent with knowledge. Because one is like God's not caring, he doesn't care about you. So what would make it? What would make you as a created being be able to derive true statements?
Okay.
Like why would he care about allowing you to obtain the truth in a different God? And malevolent God would even be more so inclined to instill inaccurate, innate qualities into you. So you're wrong. So you're back to misperception.
Unless the truth hurts.
Unless the truth hurts,
then he would want us to know the truth. Let's be clear. In the story of the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it was Satan who told the truth. Well, not really Satan; it was the serpent, but later on, it's interpreted to be Satan.
Well,
he had him eat from the knowledge of good and evil. God didn't want him to.
Well, that's not really, I don't think, good theology. I think that the whole point of the knowledge of good and evil, that was the first sin, of course, and I'm not sure what exactly the essence of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was, but it seems to me that it just like enabled them to engage in acts of evil and perversion. That seems to me it just opened up a Pandora's box, so to speak. It wasn't necessarily that they were locked off from the truth.
No, not the truth. Knowledge of good and evil. Not all truths, but knowledge of good and evil. Because nothing changed. They were naked before, they were naked after. But when they were naked and they said, we put on clothes because we're naked, God said, who told you were naked?
Mm-hmm.
And they knew it because they had eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's kind of it takes us a little left field, but I'm just saying that a malevolent God doesn't necessarily, that idea that it want anyone to have knowledge. Okay. But back to I want to know why Christianity. You wanted to make the case for Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just, the qualities I've laid out so far are the necessary characteristics of the Christian God. Okay. So those are the only things you can really prove performatively, as far as I can tell.
But aren't those the characteristics of the Jewish God and the Muslim God as well? Do they differ in their characteristics of how they would describe God?
I'm not sure about the Muslim God, but like Allah, but yeah, the Jewish God is this. We claim the same God. The Christians claim the same God.
Well, sure, they claim the same God, but you also take an additional leap and accept Jesus, whereas they do. Yeah. So I'm saying, why accept Christianity?
Yeah, I think that in regard to empirical data, a lot of it's blocked off to us. There's temples built on top of, there's giant mosques built on top of invaluable
stuff we can't know.
Invaluable
based on what we do know. Why should anyone accept Christianity?
It seems consistent with observation, with empirical observations and archaeological and historical observation.
It seems consistent with empirical observation that a man could die on a cross and then rise from the dead 3 days later. That's consistent with empirical observation. It contradicts everything we know about life.
He's God.
Okay, but you told me earlier we don't have an empirical empirical experience of God. So that would kind of contradict that. But let me just do you agree with me that if two contradictory statements are made, then they cannot both be true? Would you agree with that?
If two contradictory statements are made,
contradictory statements cannot both be true.
Yes,
one of them's wrong.
But the way you're defining everything.
No, I'm just asking. I'm asking a question. I'm not defining. I'm wondering.
Yeah, but I mean, but you went into the wine and water thing earlier.
Okay, I'm just talking about propositions.
Yeah.
Now, before when I was talking
I agree. I
Okay.
agree.
So if God is a perfect being
Mhm.
and the Bible is the word of God, then we would expect there to be no contradictions, right?
In the Word of God,
In the word of God, yeah.
yeah, I would expect there to be no contradictions. Yeah,
Okay.
but a lot of people have tried to make it seem like there's
Well,
contradictions. Yeah.
you have a Bible with you? I mean, we can.
Oh yeah, I do.
Okay.
Right
Deuteronomy
here.
10:22.
Okay, what's your
No, just read
zinger?
Deuteronomy 10:22. How many people went down to Egypt? How many of their fathers does it say went down to Egypt? Deuteronomy 10:22.
10:22. Sorry, I was on the wrong thing. Your fathers went down to Egypt with 70 persons, and now the
Okay.
Lord your God has made you
70.
as the
Okay.
stars of
Now
heaven.
go to Acts 7:14.
Okay. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal and sold under sin. Oh, sorry, that's Romans. Uh, 7 what?
14.
7:14. $75 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one claim is at 7, the other's at 75. Clear contradiction.
Okay.
Inescapable. Word of
Okay.
God. How can there be that kind of contradiction?
So
If God is
where's the
perfect,
first one again?
Deuteronomy 10:22. It's also in Exodus 1:5 and Genesis 46:27.
11:22. You said Deuteronomy or 10:22.
Deuteronomy was 10:22.
Okay. Your fathers went down to Egypt to 70 persons, and now the Lord your God has made you as the stars of heaven in multitude.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you went down to Egypt to 70 persons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what's the second one again? Sorry,
Acts 7:14.
7:14. Then Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. So they went down. So tell me, you go down to 70 people,
Yeah.
and then later at a later point there's 75 people. Is birthing and procreation not a thing, Michael?
Of course it is.
I mean,
But
and
of
can
course
you
it
not
is.
take people into your
Of
into your
course it is. But that's
familial group
hold on.
like
But
it
that's
was the
hold on.
norm
That's
back in
not
the
how
day?
that's interpreted. It's not that they've added.
That's not how you interpret it.
They're referring. No, I mean you go into your
Yeah.
Strongs or whatever. Okay. How about Acts 7:16?
Oh, I mean, you know what it says. How about you just tell me it right now?
Okay. That's the reason I
I'm
wanted
not
you
going
to
to search
look.
around because that was a really lame example you just
No,
gave.
no. My purpose is this: is that I wanted you to look because
Yeah,
if
I
I'm
get it.
just telling you, maybe you don't trust me. Okay.
Oh, no,
Acts
I trust you. I mean,
Okay,
you had
okay.
something, but it
Acts
didn't work.
7:16. Acts 7:16.
Okay.
Stephen says Jacob was buried in Shechem. In
Okay.
actuality, he was buried in Hebron. Genesis 50:13. Matthew 2:23 says that Jesus fulfilled the prophecy that he shall be called a
Okay.
Nazarene. That prophecy appears nowhere in the Old Testament. Romans
Well, there's
11:26
something called the
says the
Talmud.
deliverer. Romans 11:26 says the deliverer will come from Zion, but Isaiah says the deliverer will come to Zion, right? Hebrews 8:9, for they
Okay.
did not continue in my covenant, and I did not care for them. The verse actually states my covenants which they broke, although I was a husband to them. Two different things. Isaiah 7:14 in Hebrew says the young woman will give birth. The New
Okay.
Testament cites it as saying a virgin will give birth.
A young woman.
It says a virgin in the new
But the first
New
one says
Testament.
young woman.
In the Old Testament, it says old woman in Hebrew. The New Testament cites it as saying virgin, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So it's not a
Well,
contradiction.
a virgin
A young
is
woman and a virgin.
it's the
I
same
mean,
thing.
I mean,
It's
it
the
could
same
be.
thing.
I mean,
So
there's certainly a lot of old people who are virgins.
So when Matthew says that the Old Testament says virgin, but it doesn't say virgin, that's not a contradiction.
Oh, so you're saying he cited that? I mean,
Yes, he said it says virgin. It doesn't.
you know how
But
language and translation
okay,
works. I mean, you can have an
I do.
inaccurate. Yeah.
Do hold on,
Yeah.
but do I know that God is supposed to be perfect? And if God is
Okay.
perfect and yet I'm still coming across that, then how could I trust anything I see in that
So
book? But here's
you're
the
coming
main
across
thing.
a contradiction in a modern translation of the Bible. I mean, yeah, I mean you can do that when people translate it poorly and leave
Okay.
out
But okay, so then in
inaccuracies.
order to understand the
Yeah,
Bible, I would have to learn Hebrew and Greek.
yeah,
Okay. Here's the main
like
thing.
perfectly. Yeah,
Here's the
that's why
main
people
thing.
learn Hebrew and Greek when they go to
Okay.
seminary.
Yes. So, okay.
I mean,
So,
here, so here, wait,
okay,
wait.
hold on. So
So,
that's
so
how,
for the
hold on. So
semians,
when you go, right, and you want to
yeah,
proselytize somebody, first of all, do
okay,
you know Hebrew and Greek?
no,
Okay, then how can you be sure that you understand the Bible or know what it says or means?
I I have a translation that I find trustworthy.
Hold on. But you just said you can't rely on that. You just
I
said you had to
can.
know Hebrew and Greek, but you don't.
What? So what? I just said that when you come across these silly contradictions,
Okay, they're
supposed
silly. Hold on,
contradictions,
they're silly contradictions.
supposed
But
contradictions,
hold on.
which you read into
Wait a
something,
second. You said, hold on. First of all, you said you trusted me. You didn't need the Bible that I told you to check. Then you said there's
Oh,
silly
I
contradictions.
trusted you that you were
Hold on.
reading a
Now
Bible.
you say that they're not contradictions at all. But if it's
Yeah,
truly
they
the
aren't.
word, if it's truly the word of God, the perfect God, there should be no contradiction. But here's the biggest one: the prophecy of a Messiah. The
Okay.
prophecy of the Messiah, as understood by the
Mm-hmm.
Jews and what was coming, was that you would have a Messiah that would come, be a king on earth, and establish peace
Yeah.
among all men when he came, right? This
Yeah.
is Nachmanides' debate with the church. The
Mm-hmm.
problem with that is Jesus didn't accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus came and did not accomplish the prophecies of the Messiah. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
establish peace on earth.
Yeah, that's why he'll come again.
But that's not what the original prophecy said. It
Okay.
didn't say you're going to have this guy, he's going to come, he's going to
The
die on a
original
cross,
prophecy is
and
actually
then
found in Genesis. It's called the Proto-Evangelion, and the seed of God will just conquer the seed of the serpent. Like that's the original prophecy. If you want to get down to brass tacks,
okay, what does that have to do with the second coming?
because the seed of God is Christ.
Okay, but what does that
I
have
mean,
to do with the second
it doesn't
coming? What does that have to do with the second coming?
because in the first coming, if he did not conquer the serpent, he will, and again,
But that's
he
not
will
what it
eventually.
said.
Yeah,
That's what
and
you're
that
saying now because you know that he
no,
didn't do it the first time, right? And if he's
okay,
God, why, when he's on the cross dying, does he say, Father, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? First of all, he showed a lack of faith. Secondly, it's not normal that a person would talk to himself in that way.
mm-hmm. Well, he's both God and man. Yeah.
So he's one part of him's talking to another part, and one part of him's doubting the other
Oh,
part.
there's the Godhead. It's the Trinity. I mean, there's Father, Son, and Holy
Okay.
Spirit.
But
Yeah.
is he, so who's he doubting then? When he's
I,
claimed that he's forsaken, who is he saying forsook
I'm
him?
unsure. I mean, you'd have to talk to maybe a pastor if you go to
Okay,
church.
here's the problem. The pastor didn't contact me and say he wanted to come on and defend
Yeah.
Christianity. Benjamin
Oh,
Seevers did.
when I say I want to defend Christianity, all I want to do is defend the necessary characteristics of Christian God, which is what I
Oh,
attempted to do for you. I
oh,
mean,
okay. I didn't.
I'm not making defenses for every nitty
Uh-oh.
gritty
What did I
detail of the
do?
Bible.
I took you off my screen. Oh no.
What happened?
I don't know. I don't know.
You're trying to censor me.
Well, then I wouldn't have you be able to hear me still.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, if I want to censor you, I might.
Yeah, yeah. You kick me
I'd
out and
rather
kick me
keep your
off.
picture
Yeah.
and get rid
Yeah.
get rid
Yeah.
of you.
Yeah.
Well,
So
Benjamin, you've been listen. I appreciate you coming on the show. I'd like to maybe have you on again, maybe talk economics because that's where I
I mean,
actually we're simpatico when it comes to
okay.
economics, just not
Yeah.
theology. But in fairness, before I let you go, I don't. I want to make sure that you've said everything you want to say. So what would you like to add? What did I maybe not ask? What do you think I didn't let you express? I want to give you a shot to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I think where we come down to problems is where we're starting off epistemically. And I don't know if that's reconcilable, but we can certainly try to hash it out in the future. Um, when I wanted to come on, all I really wanted to do was defend the Christian God's necessary characteristics. And as I said earlier, there might be other religions that have a God that has similar
Mm.
characteristics. Like the Sikhs, I think they have a God or that is at least analogical to the Christian God. So yeah, I wouldn't deny their faith on the grounds that I've argued here. Uh, I do think that the Bible is, at least the historical events in the Bible, are historically accurate, many of them. And there are alleged and supposed and seeming contradictions, like the one you mentioned, like the few you mentioned. But a lot of it, as I have found, comes down to translation, what how people understand language, relevant material. Like there's chronology in some of the New Testament books that isn't the point. Sometimes chronology isn't the point. Sometimes is giving a story that presents a theme. Sometimes that's the reason for why you organize it a certain way. Sometimes just collecting information and writing it down, and the way you receive it is the way you do it, as I think Luke did. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff that I can't work through. I don't know Hebrew or Greek. I'm not a trained theologian. I I'm just a student that studies philosophy and economics, and I'm a Christian. I'm not raised into it, but I think it's for the most part correct, as far as I can tell. And I think that the Christian God is necessary for logic. And if anyone wants to read more, um, Cornelius Van Til and R.J. Rushdoony have written some books on this very topic. They're presuppositionalists. I think they're a little distinct from what I'm saying here. I don't think I don't know, they don't have the same philosophical foundations as I do, but they're making a very similar point. Economist Gary North has also made similar points to what I'm making here. So yeah, I guess that's how I'll end it.
All right. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah, I have Twitter. I think it's official, so official Seevers. I think there might be an underscore between the two. And I have a Mises.org writers page. So go to Mises.org and search Benjamin Seevers, Seevers. That's how you can find my writings. I have a page on EconLog too. I have one article on there, but maybe some in the future. So that's how you can find me. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Benjamin, thanks a lot for coming on. For now, this is Michael Liebowitz signing out, the Rational Egoist. Remember, like, share, comment, subscribe. Till next time.